Thanks, Chair. I understand the CSIRO executive recently completed an annual performance and investment review process. Can you outline what was involved in the process?
Sure, Senator. So we do this every year. We look at the portfolio of our investments and the objectives that we're aiming for in each part of the organisation. And we do kind of a future survey of where we think Australia is going to have challenges or opportunities going forward into the future. And then we shift the shape of our portfolio so that we position to be in a better place if those things happen in the future. So to give you an example, 4 years ago, we increased our investment or our focus on dealing with pandemics and diseases. We beefed up our ability, for example, to scale up vaccines using a biologics manufacturing line that we built at Clayton. We beefed up our PC4 lab, which is one of only 5 or 6 in the world, so that if we did have a pandemic, and really we weren't thinking pandemic, we were thinking, white spot prawn, African swine flu, white spot prawn disease, one of these things that comes in from the food that we import that might be a risk to livestock or people. We beefed up our ability to deal with that, and fortunately we did, because then when COVID happened, we were really on the front foot to deal with it. So APS is all about what could happen in the future in Australia, where might markets shift, and what science and technology do Australian industry need to be better positioned to deal with that. Another big shift we made was in artificial intelligence, which is paying off now in our predictive models for bushfires and bushfire control.
Okay. So there wasn't anything significant in this review, it was just a standard review that you do each year?
Yeah, we do it every year just to make sure that we're sort of aiming at the right things. So I'll give you an example. We launched a program of missions during the year. These are where we try to really solve a really specific problem, like hydrogen production or critical energy metals. And so we shifted resources to focus more specifically on those problems. So that's one area. Advanced manufacturing or agile manufacturing is an area where we increased our investment, because we learned during the pandemic that if we could help factories shift from what they normally make to make like a personal safety equipment, surgical masks that we couldn't buy in from overseas during the pandemic, if we could figure out how to do that more easily, then we'd give Australian companies an unfair advantage where they could shift their product mix based on changes in the market. So we invested more in that area. These are sort of the examples where we're trying to really be specific about what science we do to help industry.
Yeah. I understand as a result of this review, all areas of CSIRO have now been allocated indicative funding for the next 4 years?
Been allocated?
Indicative funding for the next 4 years?
We do plan a 4-year budget, but that has to be approved by our board, so that hasn't happened yet. But we've done our math, if you like, on that.
Okay. Could you detail which areas have received additional funding to grow?
Basically, our missions program, which covers most areas of CSIRO. I probably could go through those, but essentially areas where Australian industry has or needs an advantage. So agriculture and food, energy, minerals, advanced manufacturing, what we call future industries, which is particularly digital or advanced manufacturing, and then of course health, and then aspects of national security, so cyber security, for example, or protecting Australia better from cyber threats and biological threats. So they generally fall into those 6 sort of national challenge areas.
And I presume that some areas have suffered reduced levels of funding as a result.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, our budget envelope has actually grown, but where we put our priority does shift. What we've noticed, Senator, in science, in innovation though, it no longer happens in individual parts of the organisation. It happens kind of at the intersection. So for example, we have a business unit called manufacturing, but manufacturing is done there. It's done in our digital business unit, Data 61. It's done in agriculture and food. It's done in minerals. And so that overall, if you like, portfolio of manufacturing is actually probably grown a little bit.
So just to pin you down on this, so there have been some areas that have suffered. I'm just trying to get a sense, like you gave me a sense of where you're spending more money.
Yeah.
I suppose what's considered less of a priority?
We haven't enacted those changes yet, Senator, though. This is just planning, but I'm not quite sure how to answer your question. maybe you could ask me again.
Well, you said which areas you focus on and have received additional money. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what areas, as a result, are not receiving as much money or not receiving as much focus.
Right. I'd probably have to wait until we had our budget finalised before I could answer that accurately, Senator.
Maybe could you take it on notice?
Sure.
And I presume that these decisions are consistent with the CSIRO's overall strategy?
Yes, Senator.
Did the review process determine staffing levels for each of the various scientific and support areas of the CSIRO?
Staffing's generally decided at the business unit or the ESS unit level, Senator.
Okay. So will jobs in some areas grow more than jobs in other areas?
So, yeah, sorry, I'm confusing two things. So you're thinking of CSIRO as in the business units or the structural units, and when we do APAIRs, we don't look at it by business unit, we look at it by portfolio grouping. Mm-hmm. So because of this fact that manufacturing doesn't just happen in the manufacturing BU. Now, in the past, CSIRO tried to structure so that all the manufacturing happened in one business unit and all the ag happened in another, but innovation doesn't work that way anymore, Senator. So we tend to look at the portfolio rather than the structure, because if otherwise we'd be changing the structure every year to shift the portfolio.
Yeah. Well, I'll just focus in on the jobs thing then specifically for a bit. So will jobs be cut in any of the scientific and support areas of the CSIRO this year?
I think we'll probably see some shift. So Senator, we have a thing called interchange, where we move people for retraining and then redeployment to other parts of the business. So I think you'll see the roughly the size of the organisation stay more or less the same, but you will see people shift from one part of the business to another, or maybe some people will move to a university, and maybe other people will come in, but the overall size of the business will stay about the same.
Okay, so is the average staffing level a factor in any proposed job reductions in the CSIRO?
We're well below the ASL limit, Senator.